topic tonight, as we advertised, is abusive parents and what level of responsibility does a child have to honor their parents if they're not perfect. Well, not perfect, but if they're abusive. So a guy goes to the hospital to visit his mother-in-law. She's very ill, comes home. His wife says, what did the doctor say? Says the doctor said she's moving in permanently with us. So the wife says, how could that be? She's so bad, she's really ill. How could the doctor say that? Says, I don't know. The doctors came and said, expect the worst. So life is filled with relationships that are challenging, and of those relationships that are most challenging is that of parents and children. There's a lot of emotion involved, a lot of expectations, such that are disappointments and causes a lot of stress. So you have, on one hand, parents are hoping that their children appreciate what they do for them, and thereby sometimes are disappointed when, instead of appreciating, they feel that there's a feeling of being ungrateful for their children. On the other hand, children expect parents to do the right thing by them. And if they feel that they didn't raise them in the healthiest manner, didn't give them the best they could, they feel like shortchanged. Sometimes they feel shortchanged by it, right? The story of the three elderly women speaking to each other. The one guy says, my son, he's amazing. Every year at my birthday, he takes me on a cruise, 2-week cruise. The other one says, my son, last year at my birthday, he bought me a new car. The third one says, that's nothing. My son pays $500 a week paying a psychologist. $500 a week. And what does he talk about? Me. So children sometimes are so disappointed in their parents that all they do is talk about the psychologist about them, right? So here's the question: what is the mitzvah, the command in the Torah, that we honor our parents? How far does it go? What's the level of responsibility? I'll give you two case studies. So this girl writes as follows: she writes, when I was 5 years old, my father left us. He went overseas, made a lot of money. We never heard from him. Didn't send us a penny. Now I'm 20 years old. I get a phone call. He's sick in hospital, and he's sorry for, he's sorry for everything of the past, but he's asking me to come and visit him regularly. So I'm asking, do I have an obligation to honor him when he wasn't there for me all my life? So that's the question. What is the responsibility of honoring your parents? If honoring your parents is what we call in Hebrew hakarat hatov, which means that you are grateful, that you're not an ingrate, that you repay in kind, then in this case, he did nothing for her. So maybe she has no responsibility of honoring him because he didn't do anything for her in her lifetime. Here's another case study, one that I think is far more likely to occur than the previous one. Regular people could have this issue. Someone asks the following question. My parents live near us, and we invite them often to our home to eat by us the Shabbos meal. However, my mother is always commenting and criticizing me in front of the children, and she just disturbs my joy of Shabbos? Can I not invite them? When they ask, could they come over? Can I say no? Am I obligated to have them over if every time they're there, all it is constant criticism, and it's I think undermining my family life, undermining my children. Do I have an obligation to still invite them to my home? So, in other words, how much do we have to suffer for honoring your parents? In order to be able to figure out the answers to these questions, we must look into the foundation and the principles behind honoring parents. And based on those principles, we'll be able to then figure out how we would deal with these situations and others that are similar to it. Now we know that honoring your parents, the Torah considers one of the most important mitzvahs. The Talmud calls it the most strict of the strict. Honoring parents is called the most strict of the strict of mitzvahs. That's how heavy the Talmud sees it. To the extent when the great sages of the Talmud, the first generation of Talmudic scholars, called Rabbi Yochanan, his father passed away before he was born, and his mother passed away in childbirth. So he was born a total orphan. When the Talmud discusses the responsibilities that a child has to their parents in honoring them, Rabbi Yochanan says, to a certain extent, I am happy I was born an orphan, because there's no way I could keep all the laws of honoring your parents properly. That's how far he went. Okay, so that's quite heavy statement to make. Now, of course, the reason we're talking about it this week in particular is because in the Torah portion that we're going to read this week we read the Ten Commandments. And the fifth of the Ten Commandments is honor your father and mother, right? So, Ten Commandments are the commandments that God vocally spoke to the Jewish people, and we heard it. And then, 40 days later, Moses came down the mountain with the same commandments engraved in stone, in the Luchot. Now, the Luchot were made of two tablets, two stones, 5 on the right and 5 on the left. The 5 on the right are, I am God your God, don't have other gods before me, don't take my name in vain, keep the Sabbath. That's the first 4. The last 5 are don't murder, don't commit adultery, don't kidnap. It says don't steal. We translated don't steal, but it's actually stealing a person. So it's don't kidnap, don't bear false witness, and finally, lo yisachmoid, don't covet. So,
Track that there in verse 2.
So finally, don't covet, right? So we generally know that these commandments are split into 2 series of 5. There's 5 on the right and 5 on the left. The 5 on the right are associated between man and God. And that's why all of those commands have God's name. I am God, your God. Do not have other gods. Lo tisah Hashem Hashem Elokecha lashav. Do not speak the name of God in vain. Keep the Sabbath day holy. Even there, Shabbos L'Hashem Elokecha. It is a Sabbath for Hashem your God. The final 5 don't have God's name. The 5th one, honoring your parents, does have God's name, as God has commanded you. Honor your father and mother as God has commanded you. So many of the commentaries discuss this phenomena. The fact that honoring your parents, which would seem to be a law between man and man, what we might call a law to better society, just like the other 5 laws, the better don't murder, etc., is to have a proper social order. These are laws that are to have a better society. The first 5 are laws to honor God. They're associated between us and God. Believe in God, don't take his name in vain, keep the Sabbath as a day of remembering God, and so on, which are the basics of Shabbos, that God created the world in 7 days, 6 days and 7th day he rested. That's why you keep Sabbath. So that's what we say in the Kiddush. So the one that kind of is funny that it's here, sticks out to what's it doing in the first 5, it should be part of the last 5, is honoring your parents. And why is God's name mentioned here as well? Now, the Torah goes further. When the Torah talks to us about how to honor parents, it makes it similar. It speaks about it in the same way as it does honoring God. Wow. So this is what Maimonides writes. Honoring your father and mother is a great mitzvah, and so is respecting them, having awe of them. For the verse likens it to the honor and awe that we must have for God. It says, honor your father and mother, and it also says, honor God. It says a man should honor his father, should have awe of his mother and father, and it says you should be in awe of God. Just as he commanded for the honor of his great name and to have awe of his great name, so too did he command us to honor and have awe of one's parents. What does it mean to have awe? Do not sit in their place. Do not contradict their words, and never call them by their first names. A child is not meant to call their parents by their first name. People don't realize it. And today it's sometimes fashionable for children to just call their parents by their first names. So the Maimonides says, should never call them by their first names, whether they're alive or have passed on. That's how serious honoring parents is. So there's obviously an expression of godliness in our parents. There's something to do with honoring God, with respecting God when we talk about our parents. And one thing of that, what this says to us also is another important distinction that some people fail with today, or I shouldn't say fail, let's just say make the mistake today, is that you have to have awe of your parents just like you have to have awe of God, right? Awe means that you're not at the same level. You have to see as on a pedestal. And people sometimes want to be their children's best friends. But if you're your child's best friend, they won't have awe of you. You're just their buddy. There has to be a certain respect where they're seen at a little bit of a higher position. That's the Torah's perspective. That's why you have to have awe of them. Otherwise, if they're best friend, you can't be in awe. Our sages have actually said incredible things about it. So, for example, Rabbi Tarfon, one of the great sages of the Talmud, would literally, if it was somewhere that was muddy or difficult for his mother to walk, he would bend down on his knees and put his hands underneath his mother's foot so she could take a step, so that she shouldn't have to walk in somewhere uncomfortable. That's how far Rabbi Tarfon went. And when the Talmudic scholars were told, or the Talmudic rabbis of the Talmud were told that this is what Rabbi Tarfon did, they said to him, you have still not fulfilled even half the amount that you're meant to in honoring your parents. And now you can understand why Rabbi Yochanan said what he said earlier, right? That is, wow, I haven't fulfilled half. So that's why he said, there's no way I'm going to be able to fulfill this properly. There's actually a non-Jewish fellow called Dama ben Isina, who the Talmud tells us 2 stories about him. One is quite famous, and one is less so. So Dama ben Isina was a wealthy fellow. He lived with his father, and the story is told that on the breastplate there were 12 stones, and one of the stone was missing or lost, or the rabbis needed to buy one of the stones in the breastplate. So they came to his home, to Dubba ben Asina's home, and they said that we need this stone on the breastplate. Could we buy it from you? Here we have it. And they're ready to give him an exorbitant amount of money. And what Dubba ben Asina said was that the problem is, my father's sleeping now. The key to the chest where the gem is kept is under his pillow, and I'm not going to wake him up. And they said, but we really need it now. I'm not going to wake him up. And he wouldn't go and wake up his father, even if it meant an incredible amount of money. The Talmud tells us that the reward was that the next year he got a red heifer. A red heifer was born in his home, and we know that when we need a red heifer, the amount that we would pay for it is exorbitant. And so, indeed, that's how he got repaid for it. But that's what this non-Jewish fellow, Dubba ben Asina, shown the level of respect that he had for his father. The other story the Talmud tells us is that his mother went crazy, and he was in the Senate in Rome. He was actually, it says, the head of the Senate. And he was sitting in front of the Senate, and his mother comes in and spits in his face, takes off her shoe, and beats him with her shoe. At some point, the shoe fell out of his hand. So he bends down, gives her back her shoe. That's the level of respect that this individual, this non-Jewish fellow called Dubba ben Asina, had for his father. So the question is, what is the foundation? What is the source of what is the foundation of having this incredible level of respect and honor and for our parents? Why does it have to be to such a degree? So here's a story. One of the great sages of about 300-400 years ago was Rabbi Yonasan Eibschitz. He was the Rabbi of Prague. Before he became the Rabbi of Prague, he was a rabbi in a small town. And one day he gets a messenger comes and invites him to take the community of Prague. I've asked you to come take on this very prestigious position of being rabbi of the great city of Prague. Now, we even know now how Prague would have been a very special city, and some of the greatest rabbis were rabbis in Prague. One of them being Rabbi Nochum Schapiro. So when they came, he didn't say yes right away. He said, well, give me a few weeks. Okay. A few weeks passed, and in the meantime, there was a leak. The city, people in town, where he was rabbi then, heard about it. The rabbi is thinking of leaving to go to Prague. Or he's not thinking, maybe, that he is going to Prague. And Rabbi Nochum waited a few weeks, and then he received, he accepted. The people of Prague were extremely excited. They sent 3 wagons to pick up the rabbi, their new rabbi who's going to come now be the rabbi in their community. But to everyone's surprise, the rabbi didn't leave right away. He let them stay there. They stayed for 3 days until the wagon drivers are getting a little itchy. Now we need to go. So after the 3 days, the rabbi tells the leaders of the community, bring everyone together to say goodbye. We're going to have a goodbye talk. And he gets up on the bima and he says to them as follows. He says, I'm leaving, and I'm asking you that as I leave, you should keep Torah mitzvahs. You should go to shul in the morning, put on tefillin, talis, separating milk and meat, keep kosher properly, keep Shabbos, fast on Yom Kippur. So, after talking this in vain for half hour, some guy says, Rabbi, what do you take us for? I mean, we're God-fearing Jews. Of course we keep the mitzvahs. Imagine you came here, we had a conference of shluchim the other way, right? We had, 60 rabbis from Australia and New Zealand. Imagine you went into that crowd and you say, don't forget to keep Shabbos and to not eat treif. I mean, it'd be ridiculous, right? This is what we're talking about. He's not talking about people who don't. They're talking about a community of religious Jews. So they're saying, why are you telling us this? So he says to them as follows. He says, I've been here for many years. Day and night I've given myself over to the community. And I've given myself over to the community. Anyone who had a problem marrying off a child, I helped them. If a couple had issues with their relationships, that come and talk to me, would sit around, I'd give them advice. What didn't I do for you? I was sure that when you heard I could be leaving, you would all be coming and asking me to stay. So, we'll maybe give you a greater salary, better conditions, better situations. But garnished, you accepted it, fine. So I think if you could be ingrateful to this extent to me, then tomorrow you could be ingrateful to God and say, we don't need all this. So that's why I made that comment. So what does that tell us? One of the foundations of Judaism, one of the mitzvot, or one of the ideals, not mitzvot, ideals that Judaism tries to educate us with, is this concept of being grateful and not being an ingrate. Many mitzvahs actually have this as its theme. Bikurim, for example, the first fruits, etc. Many of the mitzvahs in the Torah have this ideal as its theme and its purpose. So, that means to be a mensch, right? It's important to be a mensch. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't hit the water to make it into blood. They asked Aaron to do it because he was saved by the water. Right? It goes even further. Our sages tell us that if someone did something, this is something fascinating and important in human life in general. This is by the way, not so by the way, because we're talking about gratitude. But human nature is, have you heard the statement, what have you done for me lately? What does what have you done for me lately means? It doesn't matter what you did yesterday. If today you offended me, you did something wrong to me, that's it. We're not besties anymore. And worse. Why? Because of this bad thing you did me. How about the good I did? It's superseded by the bad. So here's the law in the Torah. Do not hate an Egyptian because he found refuge in their land. When there was a famine, when there's a famine, where did you go? To Egypt. And the Egyptians supported the Jewish people for many years. For close to 100 years, the Jews were supported by Egypt without them becoming racist, anti-Semites, and persecuting us. Yes, thereafter, they did become terrible anti-Semites, and they persecuted us. So the Torah tells us that the bad doesn't negate the good. And the fact that they persecuted us in Egypt, and we celebrate, and we had to save ourselves, etc., does not take away the fact that you always have to remember that you also have to be grateful for the good. That's how far it goes. That's so contrary to human nature. Because one bad thing makes you wipe the slate of all the good that was done in the past. And Jewish law says no. Why? Because gratitude is seen as extremely important. It's part of, as I said, being a mensch. And this, therefore, is the first foundation, the first fundamental principle of why one has to honor parents. Because we owe our parents. Imagine what they did for us as we grew up. If we say thank you to the waiter, how much more so to our parents who've done so much for us. We received everything from them. There's a cute little anecdote of a fellow who went to a bakery. He used to buy 6 rolls every day. So once he asked him, why do you buy 6 rolls every day? He says, 2 are for me and my wife. 2 is to repay a debt. And 2 is to give a loan. So what do you mean? He says, the 2, me and my wife, right? The 2 to repay a debt is to pay back my parents for all they did to me. And the 2 is to give a loan to my children who ultimately are going to repay. So this is what the chinuch, there's a work, a commentary on the laws of the Torah called the chinuch from about the 1300s, great sage of the 1300s. We actually don't know his name. We just know he wrote a book called the chinuch. And his theme throughout this book is chinuch means education. He says, what is the educational purpose of this mitzvah? Every mitzvah asks that question. What is the educational value of this mitzvah? I mean, how does it train? What does it educate the person to what ideal? When we speak about honoring your parents, the ideal that he speaks about, that it actually reinforces, is gratitude. Why do you have to honor your parents? Because they did so much for you.
But parents have an obligation to take care of their children and do things for them.
Right, so that doesn't take away, that's true. But if they have an obligation, you benefited from them. You can't say, as a child, you can't say, oh, it's your obligation, therefore I'm not going to be grateful to you. You know, the waiter who's coming to give you food, you say thank you? Yeah, the Talmud says you say thank you. It's his job. He's getting paid for it. You still say thank you. Well, it depends which country. But I'm saying that's not our consideration. We have to consider the fact that this is all that they've done for us, and because they've done for us so much, we have to show gratitude as part of, as I said earlier, being a mensch. And if we're not going to be grateful to our parents, then we're not going to be grateful for God. That's going back to the story I told Rishon and Eibshitz, right? Just like this, he said, if you weren't grateful to me, you might forget God one day. That's why honoring parents is part of the mitzvahs between man and God, according to this explanation. Because honoring parents is, if we don't honor parents, we're certainly not going to honor God. But when we recognize what our parents do for us, then we will recognize what God does for us. We get it. Get this point. Now, here's a cute little vart that is brought from the Svas Emes, brought down in the Haggadah of Rabbi Lau, who was the former chief rabbi of Israel. So he says, why all mitzvahs we make a bracha, right? Baruch atah Hashem, blessed be you God, who has commanded us with his commandments and given us this mitzvah. So let's say you bring your parents a cup of tea. Why don't you make a bracha first? Blessed be God who has commanded us with the commandment of honoring my parents. There's no such blessing. Right? Similarly, there's a mitzvah to relate the story of Pesach. Right? Passover, the two main positive commands are eating matzah and relating the story. Others are rabbinic and customs and so on. Those are the two fundamental parts of the Passover Seder, is eating matzah and relating the story of the Exodus. So why isn't there also a blessing for the relating of the story of the Exodus? No blessing for it. So most mitzvahs have a blessing. You light a candle, you light a blessing. You put on tefillin, you say a blessing. You put on a talis, you say a blessing. You don't say a blessing for honoring parents, and you don't say a blessing for relating the story of Pesach. So he brings this, and the Sasem says as follows. Saying a blessing means what? It means what? It means I am doing this because God commanded me. What God wanted is that showing gratitude should become part of who we are. It should almost be automatic. Saying a blessing is God has commanded me to do this. No, it's just natural. I'm a mensch. If you're a mensch, it's natural for you to repay someone who's done something for you in kind. Get it? Get his explanation. That's why there's no blessing for it. Because a blessing would seem to say, I'm doing it because of the command, but the Torah wants the training. The person should be trained to become naturally. Should become naturally a mensch. Now, it's not all the mitzvahs. Some mitzvahs, indeed, are such that, yeah, naturally you don't want to do it, and you only do it because God told you so, and that's a good one. That's a good theme as well. But this particular ideal of being grateful and gratitude should come automatic. That's how we have to train ourselves. Okay, so that's what he says about this. Okay, so this is one foundational idea. Menschlichkeit, being grateful for what they've done for you, and that's why it's on the right side of the Ten Commandments, because it leads us also to honor God. According to, however, the perspective of Chassidus, which is the deeper dimension of the Torah, we get a deeper understanding of this issue as well. So I'll start with the following. There's a story that is hinted at in the Tanakh, or kind of little bits and pieces are said in different orders, but then it is explained. The Talmud, in the end of the tractate of Sanhedrin, tells us the greater details of the story. So stories like this: Achav and Eliyahu are actually comforting a mourner. They're together in someone's home. Achav was a terrible king of Israel. He was a wicked king, idolater, murderer. He was not a nice guy. He had a wife, Izebel, was even worse than him. So he built a temple for idolatry. He asked everyone to write on the doors of their homes in his kingdom that Achav is a heretic against God. That's how far he went. So, as I said, they meet at this Shiva house, and Achav says, it says in the Torah, it says in the Shema, and if you will serve other gods, then God will stop the rain. Hashem will get angry at you, and there won't be any rain. So he says, look, I'm an idol worshiper, and I have all the pleasures of the world, and the rain hasn't stopped. So the Torah isn't true. So Eliyahu gets really upset. Eliyahu was a kanoi. He was a zealot. So he wanted to show him. So Eliyahu says, no rain. There's not going to be any rain. Until you do tshuva, until you repent, until you change, no more rain. So what did he do? What did Eliyahu do to make this happen? He says Hashem, he knew, would be compassionate and still give rain. So the Talmud tells us there's 3 keys that only God has. 3 things that man cannot make happen, only God can. What are they? Rain, childbirth, and resurrection of the dead. Only God could achieve that. No one could decide when it's going to rain, even today, right? We have so much power over the world, but we can't do anything about rain. Is there drought? All we can do is pray, and we pray too much. So we had rain, and we did. And then we just stop, got floods everywhere. No, we can't do that either. It's not in our hands, only in God's hands. Childbirth as well. Sometimes you have people who just seem to be healthy and just can't have children. No one knows. That just doesn't happen for them. And of course, the resurrection of the dead is obvious. It's not in our hands. So Eliyahu asks God, give me the key to rain. God did. Gave him the key to rain. 3 years drought. No rain. Until Eliyahu himself had nothing to eat. It didn't rain for him. There was no rain even for him as well. Hashem sent him to a place, and he stayed in a home of a Tsarfati woman. That's what the Tanakh speaks about. And she was very kind to him, and obviously they had the means, and she fed him, she supported him. Shortly thereafter, there was a tragedy, and her son died. So she comes to Leo, and she begs him to do her a favor and make the child alive again. Resurrect the child. So Elijah davens to God and says, give me the key for resurrection. So God says, listen, you can't have two and I have one. So give me back the key for rain and I'll give you the key for resurrection. So he did. And he resurrected the child and God made it rain. Right? And that's how the rain came back to the world, right? So now, what is the unifying factor of these three? What's the common denominator of rain, childbirth, and resurrection? So the common denominator from all these is that they're supernatural. They are supernatural. Obviously, resurrection goes without saying. But the act of childbirth as well is as follows. The fact that you can give birth to something, what do most people say? It's a miracle, right? Childbirth, it's a miracle. So most people even today will say, you witness a child born out of nothing. It's basically something from nothing. Who has the power to create something from nothing? Only God. We can't create something from nothing. Now, there's the story of the scientist who says, God, we figured out, you made man out of clay. I could also. We could create life out of clay. So God says, okay, let's see. So he begs down, says, no, get your own clay. So we can't create something out of nothing. Right? So the power to give childbirth, that's a divine power in man. That's the divine power in parents. Furthermore, everything in this world comes from order to disorder. Giving birth is the opposite, coming from disorder to order, to the extent that you have children, and they have children, and they have children, and that in itself is infinite. Right? Everything else, everything a person creates has a shelf life. How long is it going to live? But the human race, or your children and your grandchildren, great-grandchildren, have the potential to live on forever, have an infinite quality to them. That is because the creation of the child is when parents actually are partner with God. They partner with God in having the child. And therefore, Nachmanides says that honoring your father and mother is honoring God, because you're honoring the God in them. It's not like one thing leads to another. Honoring my parents, I'm grateful, therefore I'll honor God and be grateful to Him. This is actually one and the same. When I'm honoring my parents, I'm honoring the divinity. Why am I honoring them? For giving birth to me? The fact that they gave birth to me is their divinity within them. So I'm honoring the divinity within them. And that's why it says, Rabbi Yosef in the Talmud says, when he heard the steps of his mother, he would say, I must stand up before the divine presence. Not just, a nice... Actually, he stood up before the divine presence in his mother. Because his mother giving birth to the child was only with the power of God. More so than any other creation or anything else we do or achieve. Is giving birth. So for the Rebbe, there's a fellow called Herschel Chitrik. I knew him from the neighborhood. As a youngster, he was once in he went to visit the Rebbe's mother, Rebbe Tzachana. And the Rebbe came, whilst he was there, the Rebbe came. Or the Rebbe was there. And then the Rebbe left. And he noticed, as the Rebbe was leaving, the paintings and the photos and the chairs around the table. And as he was walking out, he was fixing everything, and then he left. And the Rebbe's mother said to Rabbi Chitrik, she said to him, he does that every time. Now you think it's a house of an elderly woman. You think the chairs are out of order, and the pictures and the paintings are out of order? Not really. He says, since he became his bar mitzvah, he's never showed me his back. But he doesn't want to make it obvious. So he kind of like, instead of walking, backwards out of the house, out of respect for his mother, he kind of was doing things backwards. So not to make it blatant, that's what he's doing. But the mother wasn't stupid. He never showed me his back. That's how far the honoring of parents went for him. So, till now we've said as follows. Honoring parents have two foundations, right? 2 points. One is gratitude, gratefulness, and the other is the divine power within the parents. That's what you're honoring. Right? They did God's work in creating you. Now, based on this, we will come back to answer our case studies that we started earlier. So what do you think? The first case. This girl asks, my father left us when I was 5, never saw him, and now he comes back, please visit me. Do I have an obligation? The answer is, depends. If we go based on the first explanation, she has no obligation. First explanation is, it's because of being grateful, gratitude for what they've done for you. He did nothing for her. He left the house, left her alone. And from a perspective of gratitude, she has no obligation in being grateful to. But from the perspective of the fact that that is the divine image within him that created this young girl, that happened. You're alive because of him. And he is so because there was a divine power within him to create. You have an obligation, therefore, based on this, to honor and respect that. So, if we go only by the first reason, the answer is no. You don't have to. But if we go by the second reason, then the answer is yes. Therefore, based on this, is an interesting concept. It says as follows. In the 10 Commandments are mentioned in the Torah twice. The second time in Deuteronomy. And there, the verse says, honor your father and mother as Hashem has commanded you. He's commanding you now in the 10 Commandments. What do you mean, as Hashem has commanded you? So we're told that the Jewish people came last week, as soon as they left the Red Sea, they came out of the splitting of the sea, they came to a place called Marah. And the Torah says that when they came to Marah, Hashem gave them commands. Which commands? So our sages tell us, Shabbos and honoring your parents, and a few others. So we got the command to honor our parents in Marah. So when in the 10 Commandments we're told, honor your father and mother as God commanded you, when did he command you? Earlier in a place called Marah. Why is the significance? So the Chassam Sofer says like this. He says a beautiful explanation. When we came to Marah, what was the relationship of parents and children? Children didn't need their parents to feed them. There was manna from heaven. They didn't need their parents for water. There was water that came from the well of Miriam. There was water for all. They didn't need their parents for their clothing. Their clothes grew with them. The clouds of glory washed them. The mothers didn't have to do any laundry for their kids. The clouds of glory, we're told, that surrounded the Jewish people as they traveled, kept their clothes clean. So basically, there was nothing really that parents were doing for their children at this time. Just like the parents lived in the God protection, God taking care of them, so did the children. Nevertheless, God commands, honor your father and mother. Why? Because we take the second explanation. That you honor your father and mother not for what they've done for you, but for the very fact that they brought you into existence. That you're alive today because of them. That's why you honor your father and mother. Now, what's in relation to the second question? The question again being, what's if your parents annoy, or more than annoy, but actually are hurtful and trigger you and really put you in a bad situation? Let's say a mother can easily come to a child's home and create divisions in the family, create fights amongst the couple, right? Her child and in-law. They could kind of put a wedge through them, create issues with children, grandchildren, criticizing the parents in front of the children or vice versa. They could really create a kerfuffle. We know that's possible. So how do we deal with that? So here the Talmud tells us an interesting little anecdote. There's a sage called Rabbi Yassi. He had an old mother, a widow. She says to him, "I want jewelry." So he went and bought her jewelry. Then she says, "I want a shidduch." So he went to find her a shidduch. Then she says, "I want someone good looking and young like you." He picked up and moved to Israel. That's what the Talmud tells us. So here the Talmud is giving us a foundation of this question. And basically we could take from this three concepts. On the one hand, how far a child has to go to honor his parents. Bought her jewelry, try to find her a shidduch. On the other hand, you don't have to suffer because of your parents, right? You have to help your parents, but you don't have to destroy your life. Okay? A child does not have to destroy their own life because of their parents. So, do what you can, but if it's coming to such an extent that they are having unrealistic demands, and you feel that you can't live with them, what you could do is move away, even move another country. Right?
Move to St. Helens.
But thirdly, but what's important is you can never be disrespectful to them. Rabbi Asi doesn't tell his mother, "That's a ridiculous request. Are you out of your mind? You want to marry someone as young as your son?" Kind of not very realistic here. He doesn't do that. He just is respectful, shtum, he doesn't say anything, and he just says, "See you later." He just moves somewhere else.
But that's like in reality, you stay away from people that are not good for you, and if some parents not good for you, you stay away from them.
That's right.
That's
right.
feel.
That's exactly what I just said.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, but always be respectful. So remember the three things. Do whatever you can for them. You don't have to destroy your life, however. You don't have to allow them to destroy your life. Or if they make overbearing demands, you can take a step back, but always in a respectful way. And it's a last resort. Because first he did get the jewelry and then did try to find the shidduch. So it's always a last resort to say, to step aside, But we do have to remember that our responsibilities, in a sense, to our own nuclear home, our wife and children, is greater. So I'll conclude with this little anecdote of a young man who was finishing his studies, finishing his HSC. His father was very wealthy, and he did really well. And he kind of hinted to his father many times that he wouldn't mind getting a graduation gift, a nice sports car. So when there's the graduation, the morning of graduation, his father calls the son, and he's praising him, and he thanks, how well he did in his studies, and how he is, how proud he is of him, and obviously how much he loves him. And then he gives him a package. The son opens the package, and he sees, it's halfway the package, he sees it's Tanakh, in leather-bound Tanakh. He was expecting a sports car. So he throws the book down, and in anger just leaves home, and he says, with all the money you have, this is what you give me? And he disconnects. Makes a life for himself, becomes successful in his own right, has a family, always niggles him that, doesn't have a relationship with his father. One day he gets a telegram. His father passed away, and he left him all that he owed. So he comes home and goes through his father's stuff. Goes into his father's home and goes through his desk, and he sees the half-open package that his father had given him at his graduation. So he takes out the book, and he starts looking at it. He sees the father makes reference. In one point, there's a bookmark which speaks about the love of a father to his son. So he kind of grabs the book and his father not being there, he hugs the book. He hugs the Sefer, the Tanakh, and then you see something metal fall out. It's a key. The key to the sports car he wanted. With it engraved on it is the date of his graduation. And the words, paid in full. What's the message? Very often we judge our parents, and we judge them unfavorably. And we don't give them the benefit of the doubt. If we had a little bit more patience and gave a little bit more of the benefit of the doubt, then how much pain and aggravation would we be able to avoid? We would then all of a sudden start seeing how they understood things. And as famously Mark Twain said when he was everyone knows this line, when I was 14, my father was so ignorant, I couldn't be in his presence. When I turned 21, I was amazed to learn how much he had learned in just 7 years.
What was that?
When I turned 21, I was amazed to learn how much he had learned in just 7 years. I think I would kind of push the age up a little bit. I don't think it's a 21, but but you get the gist. Anyway, so this is tonight's class. Next week, of course, we're talking about an eye for an eye, or it says in the Torah for an eye for an eye. Our rabbis have made it financial, said that it's financial. How do they have the right to do so? Where do they take it from? They could just change, or it says an eye for an eye. What do you say? So that's the topic for next week.